Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Going Back. I'm Dia and today I'm joined by Nick, James and the one and only Eddie McGoldrick. Thank you, Eddie, for joining us. How's the family doing during the lockdown?
Yeah, good. Surprisingly. We've kept ourselves busy. And it's even better now the golf courses are open. So I've been able to get out there 3 times a week for the last couple of weeks. But still keeping in touch with the college, obviously with the work I do now through the football programme that I have and the Palace Foundation that it's backed by. So keeping on top of the boys for their work because they're still working with their coursework and they have to send me videos every other day of them working out and doing some technicals. So yeah, it's not been too bad. It's getting a little bit monotonous now. I think everybody's got to the end of their tether now. So hopefully we can get out of it soon enough.
Remote teaching's not easy. Tell me about it. I'm on half term this week, but it's a lot of work. And when half your students are awake all night and not awake during the day, that doesn't make it easy either. So
trying to get hold of them first thing in the morning is just no chance. I always leave it till about 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been difficult, certainly for them. And the boys used to training every day, and you know they're out of their structured timetable, and it's difficult. And getting motivated now to get out and do some work. Never mind the college work. But we've kept on top of them, and hopefully, like I say, yeah, we're on half term now officially as well this week. But although it's been a 10-week half term at the moment, so I'm missing work. I have to say that.
So let's start right at the bottom. So who did you look up to as a footballer growing up?
Oh God, I love football. I just love football from an early age, like we all did, you know. And probably one of my earliest heroes was George Best. With that, obviously, that Irish connection, and my parents being from Dublin, my dad loved George Best, so he was probably one of my earliest heroes. And then obviously as I grew up and playing the position that I played, I'd said earlier on, it wasn't until I got to probably the age of 18, 17 that I started playing as a right wing. I was always a sweeper. So Rudy Krol from the great Dutch team in the 70s was one of my big heroes as well. I used to wear my shirt outside my shorts, and was always coaches telling me to tuck it back in, and tuck it back in and take it back out because he wore his kit like that. And then obviously as I got a little bit older, Franco Baresi was in that as well. So they'd probably be my 3 standout footballers that I looked up to as I was growing up.
Going back to George Best there, I actually saw him play against Palace for Fulham and he broke Ian Evans' leg. You could hear the crack. But no offence to a little bit older than me, but the impression I get from George Best, because I saw him at the tail end, was he changed the way people saw football. Is that true, do you think?
I think so. And I think if you talk about pure entertainment, he's probably, you know, back in that era would be the first name that, you know, would roll off your tongue to the older generation, and certainly the younger generation. I think it was probably through my dad that I got to experience him. So he was just an unbelievable. And from the footage, obviously only the footage is what you pick up and you see it later on in life. But he was just memorising it. You know, at the height of his career, he was phenomenal. And I actually got to meet him. He was doing some work for Capital Gold at the time as a co-commentator, and I think I'd gone up to one of the boxes to get in the main stand to get. I think I'd won the man of the match, and he was walking down the stairs. So to actually bump into him, and he stopped and spoke to me and said, "Oh, great game today, and you know you've done really well since coming in from Northampton." And I was just like, I was in awe, you know. And then obviously later on in life, in the years, I read his book, and it's, you know, the good, the bad and the bubbly. And it was just such a disappointment to read it about him retiring at 26. And I wasn't in any way disappointed with him. It was just sad. It was a shame that somebody of such ability was troubled by, you know, what went on in his life. And he found that fame and fortune, and it just went all horribly wrong for him. So, yeah, but he was obviously my first
parallels
one.
with Gaza there, isn't there, really? It's all a bit similar.
Yeah, very much
with
so.
Gascoigne and not being able to handle the spotlight and whatever. Just coming on to that, and we said we'd have some ad hoc questions. How did you cope when people were singing your name? Because, you know, surely it must go to some people's heads. Did it affect you? Did it affect any of the other players? Did they start getting too big for their boots? Or did it put you off?
I don't think so. I think from a personal point of view, I'd had good recognition at the Cobblers at Northampton because we'd won the championship, and I was lucky enough to become a favourite there. And I think all you do, it's nice. I never got ahead of myself. I never got, it was just nice to be appreciated, and it gave you that confidence, obviously, to go on and and play better, and do what you have to do, and to be liked and appreciated by your supporters is always a great confidence booster, whoever you play for throughout your career. So, yeah, I think one of the earliest things they used to sing to me at Palace from the Arthur Waite was Charlie Chaplin on the Wing. So, yeah, or Eddie. So, yeah, it was great. It just fills you with a little bit of confidence and gives you that, that lift that you need to go into the next game. And if you make a mistake, people are not going to get on your back. So, no, I never really struggled with it, but I never really got overawed with it either. So,
Eddie, if you could think of a modern day player that maybe you would say would entertain us as much as maybe George Best knows. And I do agree with you. George Best was one of my idols, and I saw him once, but I just used to watch the videos. But who would you say of the modern era would come close to being the George Best type of player?
Oh, you'd have to say, Messi in that bracket, it would be the player. And I think the saddest thing about what's gone out of the game now is that if flair plays, it's become more structured and you don't lose the game. And probably 80% of the players that make up certainly the Premiership now and La Liga are hard-working players, that can do the basics really well. And you need to be able to do that. And then that other 20%, like the Messis and the Ronaldos and the, say the Agueros, the David Silvas, back in, the Arsenal days with Thierry Henry, those players that can change a game, at the drop of a hat, that can get people bums off seats, as they used to say back in my day. There's not many of them about now. So, we should actually cherish them a lot more than what, we possibly do.
Well, we've got Jordan Ayew at the moment. He's the closest thing we've had to George Best for ages. We've only got to look at that goal at West Brom against West Ham. That was incredible, wasn't it? Best would be proud of that.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I didn't see that coming. It was a great run and some brilliant individual skill, and he mesmerised those defenders, and it was a great finish to go through that from where he was out on the right hand side, and then to go through and so coolly finish it. That was fantastic goal. That brilliant.
So you started football in non-league football in your playing days. So what was that like, playing in non-league football? And was that the path to go to first team football? Because I know it's different now with the huge amount of investments in academies, but back in your days, I don't think that was the case. So what was that like?
Yeah, non-league football was the route through then for players. Academies weren't as big and as structured as they are nowadays. They didn't have that money to run big academies, so clubs were always looking in the lower leagues and in non-league football for, young, hungry players that could step up. And that was my first taste at 16. I was actually at Peterborough United as a schoolboy, and left at 16 and signed for Kettering Town, which was about 8 miles from my hometown club. And they were playing in what would be the equivalent of the National League now. I think it was called at the time the Alliance Premier League. So I think quickly from signing for them, I was in the first team within about 5 months. So I was about 16 and a half. I made my debut at right back and stayed in the team. And over that course of 18 months, I had lots of top flight clubs looking at me. They all came, they all went. Tottenham were really keen at the time and wanted me to go on a 2-week trial. So I was about 17 then. The great Bill Nicholson was the chief scout. He'd come to watch me over the bank holiday weekend we played down at Barnet, I think, and then we had Enfield at home on the Monday. I played well, and he wanted me to go down on a trial initially just so I could get used to the environment. And I don't know if you remember Don Masson, the old QPR player, Scottish international. Yeah. He was the manager at Kettering at the time. and he wouldn't let me go. He said to Tottenham, he said, no, we want 50 grand for him. If you don't, he's not going on trial, you've got to take it, or leave it. And Tottenham pulled out. And
a lot of money in them days, Eddie. A lot of money.
It was a lot of money. Yeah, it was a lot of money. And after that, I felt really hard done by, and I probably started sulking a little bit and felt sorry for myself, and I lost a bit of confidence and form. And I struggled for a year. And then Graham Carr, who was manager of Nuneaton Borough at the time, had watched me from 16, and he knew I was struggling, and he was manager at Nuneaton, and they were flying in the conference at the time. So he came and took me for pennies. I think it was about £1,000 he paid Kettering for me. So I went over to Nuneaton for a couple of seasons, and after that first year, Graham got the job at Northampton, and he took Trevor Morley and Richard Hill with him. I don't know if you've heard of those. Trevor went to Man City. We played in the Cobblers team together. Hilly went to Watford, and he said to me, look, you're not quite ready yet. Give it another year. Get a little bit more physical, work on your core, and prepare yourself for the 4th division, because obviously back then it was that was a blood and guts thunder league where, people were going to kick you. That's for sure. So, yeah, that was the start of it for me. And Graham came, like he said, he kept his promise, and he came back for me in 1986, and I signed for Northampton in a £20,000 deal, and that's where my league career started.
Do you think it helped you in a way? I mean, looking back at it now, instead of going to a club like Tottenham, playing in a non-league football, as you said, it's not easy. It's not easy to do due to the physicality of it, and also how people are desperate to go first in football. Do you think, looking back at it now, do you think it helped you a lot in path to your career?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think if I'd have went into the system at possibly 17 and signed for Spurs, God knows what would have happened. I probably would have got swallowed up and lost in the system and been maybe released. You don't know. It's a hypothetical question or hypothetical thought. And being released a couple of years later and dropped back down into non-league. So coming through that route and going into the 4th division with Graham was a great eye-opener. It was a great apprenticeship for me. I probably played, by the time I was 19 years of age, I probably played 200 games in the conference. So, I was experienced, and, the conference at that time was full of ex-league players that were coming towards the end of the career and would drop down just to, earn another couple of £100 a week. And, it was tough. It was tough playing out there against some of these players. So, my mum used to sit in the stand crying when I was getting kicked, and she'd be creating and giving out. But it was all part of the experience, and it gave me that drive and that determination to really go on from there. When I got to Northampton, I was determined to make the most of it.
Sorry, dear. It's troubling times for non-league clubs now, isn't it? With no revenue and whatever. It's just hope that they can all pull through. And I know a lot of local teams are kind of putting stuff out on Twitter for crowdfunding and donations. So even if you don't support them, if you can spare a few quid, just give your local club. Just to keep them going, because they are the lifeblood of the sport. And as Eddie said, maybe not so many players coming through now, but you'll still get your Jamie Vardys and your whoever's. And and
well, if you look at our club, you look at our club in particular. That year we won the championship at Northampton. We beat Crewe to win the championship, and David Platt, Jeff Thomas, and John Pemberton were all playing for Crewe that night. And then a year later, when I signed for Palace, Pembo and Jeff were there, and Platt had gone on to Aston Villa. So, in those days, those players were about. And I think even today, it's important that through that pyramid and going down the pyramid, that the amount of money that is in football now, certainly the Premiership, it's got to be filtered down, certainly after, and what we're going through now. It's really important that we do keep these clubs going. It's important for football. It's important for hope to give young players that maybe been in the system and get rejected and then go into non-league football, that that they can go through that route that people like myself and Righty and Jeff and Pembo did, and and have that hope that they can go through that system and and then get back in to professional football. So I just hope that these clubs don't start falling by the wayside, because I think they're very important for communities as well.
Yeah,
Eddie, we've had a number of discussions on our podcast about whether we as a club should continue to splash out 20, 25 million plus on players that maybe are unproven in the Premier League, or use on 2 or 3 players that are further down the leagues and try and sort of get a bargain basement player. And I've had many an argument about this, because you just see so many players that flop, and the money is just ridiculous these days. And I'm wondering whether there will be quite a few more bargains actually, coming off the back of this coronavirus episode, and maybe there won't be as much money flying around. I think the academy is going to be very, very important to us going forward.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But again, even at our club, how many players have come through the system over the last 10 years that have gone on to play in the first team? You obviously talk about Klein and Wilf would be the biggest standouts there. There has been others, but it costs a lot of money now to run an academy. It must be up to nearly £3 million a year. So what's the end product? And I think certainly with this pandemic as it is, clubs will not be spending what they could afford to spend. I mean, £30 million for Crystal Palace is huge. It's absolutely massive. Are we going to be able to afford that type of money now? I'm not so sure. But will that opportunity be given to the brightest prospects in the academy? I'm not so sure, because football clubs, that trust that they have in young players, I don't think is there anymore. And it's very difficult for players to break through. Very difficult for players to break through and go on and become a fixture in a team, and and have a 10-year career at the highest level. So God knows.
You've got to be a division below to do that as well. I mean, you missed out Moses from that list. We had other players in the season before we came up. I mean, Moses, to me, has arguably had the best career since he's left Palace, since possibly Ian Wright, because he's been everywhere, hasn't he? And he's done well. I mean, he played so well for Chelsea, playing at wing back. He's out in Turkey now. He's won medals. So we did have it, but because the risk is so high in the Premier League of failure, that you're not there's the risk, but there's also you've got money you can spend. So it kind of cuts that out, I think. So that's difficult for them.
Yeah, very much so. It is, and and agree with that. And I didn't miss Moses out on purpose. I just, I was highlighting those two as but he's had a great career. He went to Liverpool as well. Was in and out of that team. Went to Chelsea and done really well. Like you say, he's a wing back, and he's out in Turkey now, and it's fantastic. But again, over the last 10 years, those are the 3 standout names. I know we've had Scano. There's obviously been others that you'd be aware of more than me. But again, that emphasis on young, hungry players or non-league players. There's plenty of Jamie Vardys out there. They just need to be given the opportunity, and hopefully. And I just think with the way modern day football's gone, it's too easy now. And like I say, that trust. I know, and Mark Bright does a great job at the club. He's in control of all the younger players that go out on loan, and he follows their progress wherever they are, if it's Luton, whoever it is, and he speaks to the managers and speaks to the players individually to see how they're getting on and the progress they're making. And I think that's a good grounding for them. But at some point, these players need to be given an opportunity. They need to be given an opportunity. How do we know that they're not good enough to play in the first team at Palace? We don't.
You're absolutely spot on, Eddie. And one prime example is Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I mean, he only got into the team because we were literally had so many injuries and down to the bare bones that he got thrown into the team, and he just didn't look back. And after one full season, he's gone for 50 million. So it can happen, and I think it will happen again. But there has to be, you have to have the manager that's got confidence in the players. And the last manager I remember to have a confidence in a player at Crystal Palace, I think was Terry Venables, and he used to. I forget the name of the player, but he brought someone in very young. And I think it is difficult because it can backfire, and you can be found out in the Premier League. It's obviously a very tough league, but what with the money, the ridiculous amount of money it's costing to buy players, I think there has to be more opportunities given to younger players, and I think that might be if there is a financial crisis in the game, I think that definitely is going to be the way forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's risk and reward, isn't it? The risk is massive now. The risks are very, very high for clubs to take that chance. But going back to our system, if you go back to the early 90s, in 92, 93, if you looked at the team that I played in, it was full of young players that had come through the system through Alan Smith's youth team. Simon Osborne, Gareth Southgate, Dean Gordon, George Ndar, Grant Watts, all got their opportunity in the first team. You know, so it can be done, and some of those players went on to have a really good career. So it's just about trust, I think. But I do agree, James. There's too much money. The amount of money that's in football now, clubs are just not prepared to take that risk with young players because of the consequences of getting relegated.
You mentioned the 90, you played in one of the most successful periods of the club, won the Zenith Data Systems Cup, which arguably is still our best trophy to this day, finished third in the league. What was behind the success? Because it gets unnoticed at times, but team chemistry matters a lot. And to be that successful, you need to have a great bond. Was that it? Was it talent? What do you say clicked for Palace for you guys to be that successful?
Well, it was a mixture of several things. It was we had a good blend of experience and youth. Some big characters in the dressing room. I mentioned that today on the other one I did, and we spoke about that transition from leaving Northampton, little Northampton in the third, fourth division and bearing in mind Palace were in the old second division at the time, but it was still another 2 steps up for me. And to go into that dressing room, coming down from Northampton to the smoke, and walking in, and Andy Gray's there, and Mark and Ian, and some massive characters, and I really had to grasp it and hit the ground running and get myself going straight away. But we had a good blend then. We had a good blend of youth and experience and hunger. Hunger was massive. Steve was driven by having players that had that, building a squad and a team around the experienced players that we had, like Gavin Neblin and a few others, Gary O'Reilly, and but we had youth and we had good experience, so that was really important to build that dressing room around that, and then and see where we went.
Looking back on that team, sort of 10, 15, 20 years later, it was really apparent that there was some couple that had engendered, and there were clever people in that team. I mean, we talk about Super Alan Pardew put the ball in the Scousers net. We'll skip over his tenure as manager, but he went on to become a successful manager. Look at Southgate. He went on to do well. He is a successful manager, and several others have done well. Sort of Ian Wright's done well in the media, very eloquent. Mark Bright's doing well in the media. Well, do you think Coppell attracted those sort of players, or do you think he managed to kind of engender that in it? And Sir Steve, if anybody's going to have a statue outside Selhurst, it's going to be him. What was the best sort of advice he gave you?
Steve was very pragmatic. He didn't say a lot. I always remember saying to him that, because Steve had watched me even in my non-league days, going back to when I was sort of 17, 18. So he kept an eye on me. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older, like I said, I started playing as a right winger. But when he signed me, I was playing as a sweeper. I dropped back into that position for Northampton. And when I signed for him, he said, I want you to play as a right winger. So he said, and if we do change it, I know I've got that option to drop you back into that. But it's primarily, I'm signing you as a right winger. I want you to play. But Steve, and I always remember saying to him in the first week I was there, well, or even might have been when I drove down to his house on the Sunday and had dinner, and then gone to the club to sign and meet Ron Nodes, that I said, well, that's fine. I'm happy with that. Who better to be coached by an ex-Man United, ex-England international? And he said to me, oh, no, he said, I won't coach her. He said, because I train myself every day. He said, I'll leave that to Ian Evans. But Steve, Steve never really coached you in a sense that physically. He'd verbally speak to you and say, look, he'd always say to me, look, get yourself 5 or 6 crosses in per game in the first half, and get your feet under the table, get that confidence. Give your fullback always something to think about. How can you get the better of him, whether it's inside, outside, putting one in early so he drops off, and then the next time you go, he gives you that space to go and take him on. He'd always give you little dockets like that to think about, and you'd problem solve them yourself. So he was never big on coaching, really, and saying to you, right, you need to do this, you need to do that. He gave us the responsibility as players to go and do it ourselves. And to be perfectly honest, that was the advice we took, and it worked. It was good for the team, and good for the squad, and obviously we built up that reputation of, in that early 90s, of being a very formidable team.
That was a great era. I mean, that's, my favourite era, late 80s, early 90s. I mean, fantastic matches. And you were part of that. And, there was some of my best players have played during that time. What would you say, from a personal front, would have been your favourite match playing for Crystal Palace?
Well, listen. Always going to the big clubs were always great occasions. Especially where you came from, where a lot of us came from, playing 3rd and 4th division football. Then to step out at Anfield, regardless of losing 9-0, but then to obviously go on and play them again and beat them in the semi-final. Going to Old Trafford, going to Highbury, going to Stamford Bridge. There's lots of great games, but going back to the playoff, obviously that was the early start of it for me. The playoff final against Blackburn over 2 legs, where we went up to Ewood Park on a cold Wednesday, rainy night, and we got battered by Howard. And lucky not to be out of sight, to be perfectly honest. And at 3-0, I think I was fortunate enough. I think it was 2-0 and I scored with about 5 minutes to go. I made it 2-1, and then Howard Gale went up the other end and scored again. He almost single-handedly beat us on his own that night. But we always felt with that away goal that we knew getting them back to Selhurst Park, or full Selhurst Park on the Saturday, and with Mark and Ian up front, that we had the tools and the ammunition to get a result. So that was obviously my first real top level. I'd won a championship medal in the 4th division with Northampton and experienced good times, but at that highest level, to get promoted then into the old 1st division at the time that was massive.
I remember Dave Madden in that match smiling mightily as he wheeled away. Going back to that Liverpool match, I was down in London and I was listening to it on Capital Gold, and after 3-0 I turned the radio off, and then every time I turned the radio on, Liverpool scored, apart from the time I turned the radio on and we missed a penalty.
Yeah.
The crowd were brilliant that night.
Still looking for the ball.
That actually turned us around, and I think it changed us as a team. And I think, looking back, it was possibly the best thing that could have happened to us at the time, because it gave us a kick up the jacksie that we needed. It happened to Southampton. They were rubbish for a bit, weren't they? They got beat 8-0, and look at them now. So
it was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call, because I think, and not subconsciously, I don't think we purposely maybe got into that mode of thinking, oh, we've arrived and we got complacent. It was just one, and like I said today, for anybody that was there, for 20 minutes we played well. We caused them problems. Wrighty had a couple of chances, Mark had a half chance, and I think Wrighty hit the post that night. And then once they scored and it was 3-0 by half time, we sort of came in the days thinking, well, how's that happened? So we held our own for 20 minutes, and then obviously the second half is just, one that you want to forget. And, we quickly got back on the bus with our tails between our legs. And that was the game at Southampton on the following Saturday was a massive game for us and a massive turning point, because we had to go to the Dell. And obviously we were all struggling a little bit and confidence was a little bit low, and we're thinking, we need to bounce back here. And we really, we drew 1-1 that day. And, it kind of got us a little bit back on track of where we needed to be and where we wanted to get to. So, yeah, those nights, out of adversity comes some goodness. So it wasn't nice to lose 9-0 to what I would class as probably Liverpool's best ever side. in that era. But it, like I say, there was some good that came out of it.
You're involved with the Foundation Academy as a head coach, I believe. What's that like, and how did you get into that?
Well, basically, I was working at the club. I was living down in South London with a friend of mine, and I was doing some work, some corporate stuff, and a little bit on the side. And then Gary Izzett approached me and asked me to get involved with the academy. So I was helping out with the 12s and obviously living down during the week. And I was just speaking to a couple of other coaches. I think it was Dave Muir at the time, and he said about a football education program. So I came back to Northampton, and it was actually funny. A Crystal Palace fan who I'm still friends with to this day, Andy Lucy. His wife was the head teacher at a school in Northampton, and was looking to build the football program back up, and asked Andy, would I speak to her? So I went in and just spoke to them about this program, and they said, how long is it going to take to set up? Can you do it? I said, yeah. How long is it going to take? I said, it'll take about 7 to 8 months. This was the December of 2013, I think. And then I started in the January after the Christmas break, set the program up. But it wasn't for a couple of years. It was just a college academy. So it was run by me under the school name, but I was still an ambassador for the foundation. I was working out in Northern Ireland with Gary Mulcahy, who's the sporting director, and he just approached me about becoming a Palace Foundation Academy. So it was the same program, the education was the same, it was just a higher profile, had the backing of the club, and we played in the National Football Youth League.
I had a question that I just, obviously, you know, I've seen where you've been, and you've obviously kept still in the industry of football, which is great. Do you and you're still at a good age, I feel. Compare yourself with the current manager at Crystal Palace. You've got years left. What I wondered, if the opportunities came about, you know, could you see yourself managing a football league side in maybe the, you know, Championship or Premier League at some point? Was that something you'd like to do you think?
I'm not so sure now. I was asked this question earlier on, and you know, it's very difficult now, football, to be a manager. Because even the job I do myself, although it's only 5 days a week, it's hard enough. It's long days, you know. I'm out of my door at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, and I'm not getting home till 5 o'clock at night. Now, if you're a coach or a manager at league level, that's invariably longer if you're out watching games or watching videos now, as they do. So, you know, it takes up a lot of your time. So I think maybe 10 years ago, I tried it at non-league level. I did try it when I retired and I moved back to the area that I'm from, Corby. But it was tough. It was hard work, and I just didn't like the opinions. Not so much the opinions, but the way clubs were being run. That I was going in for jobs, and there was restrictions, and you know. So I love what I do now. The answer to your question would probably be, at my age, I don't think you can ever say never. But I love doing what I'm doing now. I've just become a granddad recently. I'm going to be a granddad again, so pretty, you know, in the next 6 months. So I enjoy that time that I have with my family. I love my job. I love coaching young players in the program that I do and giving them the opportunity and the guidance and to succeed, whether it's non-league football or at a higher level. So, and I love playing golf. My handicap's coming down all the time. And I like having a few beers with my friends and spending time with my family and enjoying life. So I don't need the hassle and the strain and the, you know, the stress that it brings to your life. So the answer to your question probably, James, would be, unless Steve Parish decides to get rid of Roy and takes a chance with a rookie 55-year-old, I might change my mind. But no, I can't see myself.
He's done that in the past, Eddie. He's done that with a few other ex-Palace players, like, you know, Dougie Freedman and whoever. And they've done brilliantly. So you never know. But good, honest answer, actually. I appreciate your answer. And I think that, you know, it is a very stressful position. Yeah, you don't want to go into it full on. And it appears to be a very, very difficult job of working all hours, etc. So,
well, the rewards are great, James. Listen, the rewards are great, and if somebody came along and offered you an unbelievable contract, you're going to take it. But listen, the amount of managers that are in the game that get sacked and then get another job, up until 2 or 3 years ago, it was just a never-ending roundabout. You just jumped off and jumped back on again. But I think it's slightly different now. I think clubs are looking at football. They're more business-minded now, and harder and harsher decisions have to be made, and the longevity of being in the job for any longer than 12 months is becoming increasingly more difficult to. So Roy's doing well. I know there's split opinion on our chairman, but we've been a Premiership club now for a long time, and we've steadied the ship. We're not a yo-yo club anymore, and I think on the whole, the club's in good hands under Steve.
I think. Sorry. Steve Coppell got time to develop, didn't he? Which is missing now. And yeah, you often wonder how a manager would do. How would Frank de Boer have done if he'd been given a whole season? Actually, don't imagine that. I don't want to. But yeah.
It's just he was unlucky at the time as well. I think as well. You've got to be the right fit. And I just think they went down that foreign road a little bit too early, possibly. Didn't know the league great. Fantastic footballer. Played against them actually when he played left back for Holland, and I was playing for the Republic of Ireland. Nice guy, but it just, right club, wrong place, wrong time for him, unfortunately. And
we've got Gyro. That's worth it, isn't it? We've got Gyro out of it, so we wouldn't have had him if it wasn't for Frank.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, let's talk about post Palace. I mean, you leave Palace, you go to Arsenal. Positive step in your career. You're moving to a bigger club, but unfortunately, injuries did hold you back a bit. I mean, how would you sum up your time at Arsenal?
Well, let's get one thing straight here. I need to tell you this: I never wanted to leave Palace.
Okay.
And obviously, we got relegated at the end of that season. We got relegated.
Before you go on. What did Wrighty say? Did you say anything to Wrighty after the game? Because he ran up to us fans and kissed the Arsenal badge, and there are plenty of Palace fans who have never forgiven him. I have, because of all the joy he brought me. But did you pub with him after?
No, I mean we were that disappointed in losing the game, and I think we went down by 1 goal in the end.
Yeah.
So our focus was on that. Obviously, I've heard stories over the years about Wrighty doing what he did, and Palace fans not being happy with him. But so we get relegated. Steve leaves the job a week later. Alan Smith rings me and wants to have a chat. So wants to know how I feel. And I said, well, look, I've got a World Cup coming up. I don't really want to leave Palace. Ron Nodes made it quite clear that obviously it was our first year, and it was the first year of the Premiership, and we got relegated in it, and obviously the money wasn't there like it is now with parachute payments, and there was effectively £2 million sitting on the table for myself and Jeff from Arsenal and Wolves. And Ron made it quite clear that that money was acceptable to them, and that we had to go, really. So, and I think if we hadn't got relegated, it would have been a lot harder for me to go. But there's been a lot of things sort of subjected at me over the years, or you jumped ship and went to Arsenal, and people don't know the whole facts. It wasn't a case of wanting to leave. I never wanted to leave Palace, and to be perfectly honest, yes, I was driven, ambition, and obviously wanted to play for a bit. When I say a big club, I mean the stature of Arsenal was huge at that time as well. So, they've won the league a couple of times in the cup. So, and getting relegated obviously made it a little bit easier to make that decision, but the decision was basically made for us. So going there was, we had the World Cup coming up the following year for the Republic of Ireland, and obviously, I was reluctant and worried about playing Championship football at the time. So I went and, embraced it, and, it was a new start for me, and I had to then I went into that dressing room a small fish in the ocean. Whereas at Palace, I earned the right over the 3 or 4 years previous, and winning the Player of the Year and playing well that 92-3 season. I'd scored something like 12 goals and played in a variety positions and played well. So there was interest. So yeah, I just, I went there and I tried to get on and do my best. And I think in the first year I played 37 games and, it was good. We won the Cup Winners' Cup final and I went to the World Cup. So it was all good. But listen, in life, you suffer disappointment, and especially in the industry that we play, you're always going to pick up injuries. And unfortunately, I picked up a couple of injuries with my right knee, which that same injury forced me to miss the 1990 Cup final, which I'm glad you haven't brought up. So, yeah, and I snapped my medial collateral, and it was just that second season was a bit of a struggle for me, really. I only ended up playing something like 25 games. So, yeah, it was indifferent. Let's say the first sort of 18 months were reasonably good and, successful. So, but listen, there's good and bad in everything you do. And every football club that I've ever played for, from a young kid, I've had good times and bad times. It's just something that you have to accept and get on with it. So
you were
no different.
You were kind of there at the end of the Jules Graham era, weren't you? How different was it playing the culture of the club? Because now everybody talks about how they were a blooming good team, Arsenal, at that time, and Wrighty was arguably, apart from Henry, perhaps the best player in the modern era. How different was it?
Well, in terms of travel and in terms of preparation, it was massively different to any other club that I played for. And without saying that we weren't professional at Palace, we had overnight stays, but just playing for a club of that stature, it just seems to go up a couple of notches. So in terms of that and the preparation of, how we used to do it or how they used to do it was different. So, that was slightly different and better, without being critical of Palace. But like I say, you just got on with it and you made the most of it, and you try to do your best every day. You went into training every day. You were playing where all of a sudden you got a dressing room everywhere you look full of internationals in every corner. So you had to train well every day. You couldn't have an off day. You had to train well every day, even just to get a sniff to get near the side. So that drives you on, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, you just got to pick yourself up and dust yourself down. And, that's what I try to do. And if you stay lucky through injuries and without injuries, it's, hopefully, I don't look back on my time at Arsenal and think it was a failure. I don't, because, I played sort of like nearly 60 games in the first 2 years. And at that time, George was probably the only coach at that level that was rotating his team. So he would think nothing of changing his whole midfield and forwards every other game. It could be 5 or 6 changes. So, you just had to get used to that and accept that and work even harder to get back in the side. So, but like it was mentioned earlier on, I picked up, some injuries that hampered my time there. And, unfortunately, that's part and parcel of football.
Well, you deserve that move. You were obviously at the top of your game, and you played for, arguably one of the best teams in England, and you were also playing for internationally Republic of Ireland. I mean, I didn't follow you so much when you played for Ireland, obviously, but I just wanted to know who would have been the best player that you've played with, and also the best player that you've played against, and that can be an international stage or domestic.
Of course, it's a great question, because I've been very fortunate in my career to play with some unbelievable players. I always remember, going to Palace and Wrighty was phenomenal. Brighty was an unbelievable centre forward. Some really good players. And then you go to Arsenal, and I always remember Patrick Vieira coming in from AC Milan as a young, raw 21-year-old, and you're getting to watch him and his habits around the training ground. And then obviously Dennis Bergkamp came in from Inter Milan, and I played against Dennis for Ireland, for Holland, against Holland, so knew what he was about, and obviously seen clips on the telly. So to get that experience of training and playing with him was unbelievable. It was immense. And then you look at even playing against the likes of Arsenal when I was at Palace, you were coming up against Tony Adams, who was recognised as one of the best goal centre backs in the game, and David Seaman, and Paul McGrath at Aston Villa, who I was lucky enough to play with with the Republic. And probably one of the most gifted players ever. Paul Merson was gifted. You know, he was a fantastic player on his day. But Georgie Kincladze, in terms of his pure technical ability in Man City, was just phenomenal. I've never seen anything like it. You know, he was a different player. He only played when he had the ball, rightly. Anything else on a cold, wet night at Reading, you know, in front of 6,000 fans, you weren't seeing Georgie. But at Main Road, when there was 35, 40,000 there, you know, you give him the ball and let him do it. So I was very fortunate in my career to play with some unbelievable players. You know, those 3 or 4 would be right up there. And, you know, again, probably Paolo Maldini would probably have to be the best defender I've ever played against or come up against in terms of, you know, his positioning, his strength, his reading of the game. It was very, very difficult when you came up against him. But yeah, great names, but you just got on with it. And when you look back now, it's not until you look back now and you count yourself very fortunate to share the same pitch with some of those names. So yeah, good times.
When's the book coming out, mate?
You know, my mum's always saying that to me. I should write a book, and it's funny the missus say to me, "You're very good at it," you know, because when the specialist subject is you, she says, you can talk for hours. So you should write a book. And I've done some gentleman evenings over the years, and you know, it's good. I like to get up and talk and reminisce, and talk about, you know, stories of what we went, what we got up to, and what happened, and things like that. So, but I'm just probably a little bit, you know, not bothered. It'd be nice to do it, you know, but I've never been approached, actually. But a lot of people do say to me, why don't you write a book? But I just don't have time.
So my last question for you, because it's getting late and I don't want to run out of questions. Maybe we'll get you back another time if this lockdown goes on. This is a difficult question because you've got to blow your own trumpet a bit. But who would your contemporary equivalent be if you were to say, if DR hasn't got a clue, mate, is you know, he was barely swimming around in his dad's proverbials when you were playing. So if you were to say to DR, okay, if you want a player that plays today that was a bit like I was, who would that be?
Cool. Wow. Jeez.
And we won't accept Messi because we know you were good, but...
No, listen, I wouldn't even mention myself in the same breath. That'd be a total embarrassment. Do you know what? That's so hard. I've been asked so many questions over the years, but that is the equivalent of me. Oh, wow. I honestly couldn't even answer that. I don't know. I really don't know. There's far better players out there than me than I ever was. So, and I possibly wouldn't want to liken anybody to me anyway. Do you know what I mean? Especially when I had a dodgy tash and a dodgy mullet. So that's for sure. But listen, I was I grew into my game. I was given the confidence by various managers to go and do that, and Steve let me do my own thing. And I think he appreciated the way I played. I was direct as a winger. You know, I got crosses into the box. I scored the odd goal. I was more of a provider, but I was honest about my game. You know, I was hard working. I always wanted to improve. So I couldn't honestly really answer that question. You'd probably be better answering it than me.
Eddie, come back to that one. Don't worry. Just come back to. If you think of one, just tell us before the end. But you just actually delved into my question, which is my last question. I was trying to reword this actually. I was going to say who's the best manager you've played under, but I don't want you to say it on. I don't want the answer as to say who was the best manager because they won the most. I want to rephrase it and say who was the most favourite manager you played under. So it doesn't mean to say that they had to be the most successful, but just the manager you really enjoyed working with and you had the best time with. Yeah, just that, and it could be, and it doesn't have to be Crystal Palace. It doesn't have to be.
No.
Yeah.
I get another question, James. That's really good, and like I said earlier on, it's, you know, I had good and bad at every football club, and even in my coaching career now, I've taken a little bit from every single coach or manager that I've played under. Like Graham Carr at Northampton was probably the biggest influence on my career at that time to get me to where I wanted to be. And Steve, you know, took that mantle on I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that he seen himself in me, because he was a far 10 times better player than me. But he obviously seen something as to what he was like as a player in me. So that's why he bought me, and he just let me do and gave me the confidence to go and do it. Although, you know, I'll never forgive him for, although I wasn't 100% fit for the cup final in '90. Probably only about 15% fit, but it still grates me to this day. But it wasn't his fault. But he gave me the confidence then to go and play and get to the next level with just the way he acted. Like I said earlier on, he was never a coach that would coach you, you know, tactically. He was just told, go and play, go and enjoy it, do what you need to do, get your crosses in, work hard. And then he'd just drop in with little pockets here and there. So, and then obviously very fortunately when I went to Man City after the Arsenal, he was the manager that came in and had that 32-day spell, and that was his only signing.
Yeah, no. I always found Steve Coppell, I mean, I don't know about Nick here, but I always found that whenever we went in at half-time under Steve Coppell, whatever he said at half-time was magic, because we used to come out second half and know exactly what we needed to do. And I just think Steve Coppell's team talks at half-time must have been absolutely brilliant, because he was spot on. Because every time we came out second half, we did what we needed to do. Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, very much so. He was very calm, Steve. He was never a ranter and a raver and a shouter. He was very softly spoken. I mean, there was times over the years that I played for him that he could lose his temper and would be, quite aggressive. But the majority of the time, he was a thinker. He thought a lot about football and what he needed to say and how that would have the biggest impact on you as a player in trying to improve you. So, he's definitely up there in terms of answering that question. He gave me that platform to play on at a higher level and gave me the confidence to do it. But he tested me as well. I always remember after that was probably the hardest point of my career, missing that cup final. It's something that I'd always wanted to do. And, I think I played the majority of the games up until that cup run started, and I got injured against Liverpool at Selhurst Park on the 27th of January. I remember it vividly, and the date and the time. And, but I had to pick myself up, and I struggled mentally after that. And, he set me down, and he posed me problems in terms of how I'm going to get out of it, and what I needed to do to get out of it. And then basically left me alone to do it. So, while I probably look back and think, well, maybe you could have put your arm around me, it gave me the impetus and the, that feeling that I needed to prove him wrong after what had happened. So, I'm thankful for that. And, it made me into the play. I obviously went on to win the Player of the Year at Palace, and, scored a few goals and played 189 times. So, yeah, good times, absolutely times that I'll look back on and I'll cherish and, always remember very, very fondly. Great support, even to this day when I do go down. I go to quite a lot of away games now, especially Leicester, because it's up this way. So I always enjoy taking the family to that and having a drink with the Red and Blue Army. So, yeah, great times.
It was great watching you, mate.
You need to write a book. I'm sorry, but the players that you played with, the players that you played against, and your stories with Palace, with Arsenal, it will just be a fascinating read. If you ever have the time, I'm pretty sure everyone will buy it. But thank you once again for joining us today. I really appreciate it. But yeah, as always, if you have enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let us know who you want us to chat to next. Until next time, up the Palace.